Department Store Santa versus Dogman. Dear Scary Stories NYC, have you ever hung out and partied with a bunch of department store Santas? It's always been an educational experience when I've done it, and I've got two different Dogman stories that I've collected in this way. One that was told to me in a bar by a department store Santa, and one that happened to me more recently in the woods of Virginia just before Christmas time. I'd like to relate both narratives to you here, if you're interested in some seasonal December scariness. Both stories go way back to the 20th century, so we'll have a little Dogman time traveling in this one. When I was starting out in the world as a young adult, my favorite of all my part-time jobs was becoming a Santa Claus for the same department store that my mother used to take me to as a kid. I remembered how awed I felt to sit on Santa's knee, and as a young man, I felt a huge sense of honor and awe following in those footsteps. When I got off work, I randomly discovered the local bar that two other local department store Santas went to after work each day. Those guys were much older than I was and reaching the end of their Santa careers. The two of them bought me drink after drink and told me strange story after weird story after terrifying story of their many years doing what I was a rookie at. Most of the anecdotes involved bosses or co-workers doing criminal or sexual things to each other, but one of them, the one I remember clearly, was about being chased by a freaking werewolf right down a street with traffic on it in this certain pretty large Midwestern city. This guy, let's just call him Santa Sauce. He told me this crazy, inebriated narrative that nearly scared the stuffing out of me when I was a young Santa. It was kind of a cautionary tale, but he insisted that it was true in a literal sense. So this older guy said that back when he was my age, or maybe a couple of years older, he started off in the seasonal Santa business. He, having had sharp eyes in those days, quickly noticed where and when his boss would move cash from one place to another on busy days. Cash registers got refreshed as shifts changed, and Santa Sauce made it his business to find out more about the room that the money was moved into and what happened to it after it got there. He began to romance the one lady in bookkeeping who he would need to pull off the plan that he was hatching in his head. He left work that night planning on stealing the entire payroll the next morning and walking out of the building before anyone had even understood what had happened. He had bought a ticket to South America the day before and would head straight to his boat after the theft. All he had to do was go home, get a good night's sleep, and it would all happen by itself the next day. Only when he walked out of work that day, leaving the building out of the side exit into the dark alleyway, someone was there, waiting for him, or maybe I should say something. Santa Sauce, wide-eyed, insisted to all of us in the entire bar that he turned around that night and he saw a really big werewolf that stood on two legs like a man but had a head like a wolf, and its eyes glowed in the dark like he was a living canine jack-o'-lantern. Smoke rose from the beast's nose and mouth, and he smelled like wet garbage. Santa Sauce told us that he ran out of the alleyway into the street, looking back and seeing the monster Dogman following him out under the streetlights. He ran, screaming, trying to get away from the freakish, glowing-eyed Dogman who towered at a height of 7 or 8 feet. Although he saw passers-by and asked them for help, everyone just looked at the disheveled Santa as though he were crazy. rather than help him. Some even backed away. Each time he looked behind him, the Dogman was closer. When the Santa saw a police car driving down the street, he ran in front of it to make it stop, then begged the cops to protect him from the giant demon dog. The problem was, the cops didn't see the Dogman. In fact, Santa Sauce realized that nobody else had seen the giant creature except him. The cops brought Santa in and forced him to sleep off whatever he was on in the drunk tank. During that night, the Santa told us that he decided to abandon his plans to steal money from the store in the morning. He then told us the moral of this story, in case it had flown over our heads. And that moral is this: if you are going to go out in the world representing the real, original Santa, and you're going to be trusted by the kids and the parents and your employers, you'd better do your best to be a good person throughout the duration of the experience. Otherwise, Krampus will come and get you. I reminded the guy that his story was about the Dogman and not Krampus, but he insisted they were the same thing. You do bad at Christmas time, and some kind of demon is going to come and get you. So just don't do it, he admonished me. I promised him that I would not embezzle all the money my bosses made by wooing a lady in billing, and he adopted a satisfied expression, as though he felt his work was done. At that time, it seemed funny to me that he really believed that a werewolf was a demon, that Krampus would come and get you if you were behaving in a way that dishonored Santa Claus. Then I got older, and the Dogman himself confused my mind about that. I have a story that dates back to when I first started to work as a department store Santa. Actually, I did that until I was 64 in one capacity or another for not every, but most holiday seasons. That means I've been retired nearly 20 years now, or almost 19, I guess. I started when I was 21 in a certain fairly prominent department store, which is still in business in a pretty large Midwestern city. I really loved being able to sit in a prominent location, high enough up in the air that the shoppers and the kids could see me from multiple places at a distance in the store. I could watch the whole business, felt to me at the time. Children would wave at me from other departments in the store, and I would be able to see them and wave back. My brother ruined all that for me by getting into trouble with certain prominent figures important in the running of that particular city. This kind of an important individual can sometimes hold a grudge, so I lost my day job, and I lost the ability to get part-time work at Christmas from almost any prominent local institution. People knew I had nothing to do with my brother, and I got apologized to over and over, but it was too dangerous to give me a job because of how hot my brother had become and how close he and I had been before things blew up. Nobody was threatening to take me out, but they weren't going to lift a finger to help me stay alive either. I moved southward over the years, struggling to make ends meet or find things that I could do which folks weren't afraid to hire me for. Eventually, I ended up straying far enough to get out of that family sphere of influence, settling for a while around Blackstone in Virginia. I subsisted for a year or two by working at one store after another in the general area. For Christmas one season, I was working in a department store that was a chain at the time. I don't think they're in business anymore, but they were still a thing back then. I think it might have been where the Walmart is now, judging from the map I'm looking at and comparing it to my memory. I'm talking about the outdoor mall, just at the southern end of Blackstone over there in Virginia. Now, that is not the wilderness. It is a town that a lot of nice people live in. But right behind that mall, even to this day, there's a whole mess of trees, and you don't ever know what's going to walk up on out of those trees and do something to you when you're on a smoke break or whatever it is. Maybe you're just out back getting some fresh air. Dogman doesn't care. If Dogman wants to scare you, then you're gonna get scared. So, if you have a need to duck out back, do your business and get back in the store. That's my advice to you if you work in that mall. I don't know if people from Virginia watch this show, but if any of you do, just be careful out in the back at night over there. I'm zooming in and looking, and I see these paths that have been cut in those woods since the days when I worked there. That's a very smart thing, and it only underlines what I'm telling you. They wouldn't have cut so many paths and sight lines through those woods if there hadn't been something dangerous coming up on out of there at night. Maybe the Dogman is gone now. I don't know. Maybe those new pathways have forced it to go haunt the rear of some other outdoor mall. I don't know. In either case, I'm in the beginning of telling you a story that happened nearly 40 years ago this Christmas. Get your eggnog or whatever it is you're using to keep warm and get ready, because this is going to be one chilly Christmas sleigh ride through Dogman country. So I mentioned earlier how I had been trained by the prior generation of Santas to stop at the bar after work. There was no bar in that shopping mall. There was a liquor store, though, and in fact it was the only store doing decent business. I would spend parts of the day standing out in front of there wearing a sign and advertising the store I worked at. There wasn't much call for a Santa inside because I think we maybe got 10 or 20 kids a day maximum. This was why they put the sign on me and made me walk around outside when there was no kids inside. Working alongside a highway is an awful lot different than working in an actual place. I mean a place where humans live, not a place where they zip by at 70 miles an hour. This is why I was not enjoying working out there, besides the crappier pay and so forth. Instead of sitting in a warm bar commiserating with others from my profession, I was walking in the cold, along a highway in the dark, bottle of liquor in my pocket, hoping someone didn't slide off into the right lane and run me down, whether by accident or design. Each car would create a wind so strong as to almost knock me down, and I still had another 200 feet or more to get to my covered bus stop when the skies opened up with a cold, icy sleet, snow, and rain mix. I pulled my hood over my head and looked forward to see how much further I had to go to reach shelter. In between me and that shelter was now a new obstacle. It was so large, and it blocked out my view of the bus stop. It took my eyes a little while to focus on this new obstacle, and it took my mind a little longer to do the mental gymnastics required to parse this information. Was the Dogman, the Santa Sauce Dogman from that old horror story I had doubted the truth of. It was way too large to be an ordinary dog, and the way it walked so naturally on its hind legs made it seem so unnatural to my eyes. It felt like I was watching an animation from a high-budget horror movie, except there was no screen for it to be projected on. This seemed to be a real three-dimensional, living, breathing monstrosity that towered way over me and glared down with eyes that reminded me of hot coals burning inside of his eye sockets. It was almost something from a Del Toro movie, but I knew it wasn't. I had already been told about this guy many, many years earlier. It seemed wrong seeing him out in the burbs, but if I could end up out here, why not him? I looked around to see if anyone else was noticing him, or if he was a hallucination or manifestation intended only for me to view. I didn't see a single other person anywhere around, and it was now snowing. It looked like it was only going to get thicker, and that meant even if people were around, they weren't going to be able to see me or this monster very clearly once the snow hit full power. I backed away from the Dogman, watching his feet and hoping they would stay right where they were. Nope, Instead, the beast took one step forward after I had taken 3 back. That seemed about right. His stride very well might have been 3 times my own. While I was looking at its foot, taking that step closer to me, I noticed something which I found quite interesting. Not only was the beast leaving footprints in the newly falling snow, but when he stepped down into the thin layer of it just beginning to form, it made a slight hissing noise, and I saw a puff of steam rise up around his ankle and lower leg. Not only did he seem to be physically present in a real 3-dimensional way, but he seemed to possess an extremely hot body temperature. I decided to stop deciding things or thinking them over. I decided it was time to completely panic. I ran back to the store, slipping repeatedly on the pavement, which was wet in some places and icy in others. My heart felt like Gene Krupa was using it for a drum solo. If you're under 87 years of age, and ask your grandpa Google what that last reference meant. I was running as hard as I'd run since I hit middle age, but I was slamming sensitive parts of myself into various bumpers and rear view mirrors almost as much as I was moving forward. By the time I got back to the side of the parking lot with the stores on it, I was pretty dinged up. It felt like my nose was broken and I was bleeding from either my nose or mouth, which was on my formerly white beard. I got to the liquor store wide-eyed and terrified as the guy was in the process of changing the sign to read "closed." I was banging on the glass furiously, begging him to let me in, and he was looking at me in horror. It must have looked pretty bad in that moment, like I'd been beaten up. The guy unlocked the door and let me in, then asked me if there was a gang out there or something. I shook my head no. He said I must have gotten myself in a mess of trouble and he didn't want to be part of it. He told me there was a back door and I had a minute to get myself out back before he called the cops on me. I thought this guy and I had built up a rapport while I'd been working at that outdoor mall. But it just goes to show that it's harder than ever to find the Christmas spirit inside people's hearts. I went out back on the side of the woods that I think the Dogman might have come out of in the first place. I felt so low in that moment. I thought I should just walk into there and give myself over to the Dogman. I wasn't sure what I'd done wrong, but life was treating me like a criminal, so I must just not have noticed when I was doing bad things. I think that was the lowest moment of my life. I'd been homeless earlier, but still had higher spirits than I had in that moment. And then I saw the Dogman racing out from the direction of the parking lot, having run entirely around the stores to come back around to where I was. As depressed as I had felt a moment earlier, that's how instantly panicked I became when actually confronted with the creature in reality. I saw how fast it was now running, and I realized I could never get away from it in time. It was over. The Dogman had caught me. I had appealed to a human being for help and found myself back out in the cold and about to be sacrificed to the Dogman. I felt tears freezing on my cheeks as my vision blurred. It was about to be over. Everything was coming to an abrupt end. Except it didn't. The beast didn't run at me. It ran into the woods and disappeared from my sight. Had it ever been chasing me, or had I just been in its way as it was traveling? The idea that it was a coincidence does not hold water to me. It was the thing that Santa Sauce had described to me when I was a young man. It was exactly that creature. It had come into my life and nearly given me a heart attack for some reason. It was not random. It was purposeful. But what had its intended purpose been? I kept thinking that I must have done something wrong, or I must have been thinking of doing something wrong. Otherwise, that Dogman wouldn't have come after me like that. I'm not complicated enough of a person to have been contemplating robbing the payroll and skipping to Argentina. To the best of my memory, I was doing the most honest job I could as Santa in those days. Either there was a mix-up at Santa Central, or else the Dogman might just be more chaotic and random in terms of who he attacks than Santa Sauce could have realized. Maybe it wasn't that the guy was thinking about doing something evil. Maybe it's just that Dogman resented him being dressed as such a symbol of good. Well, that's what I think about it. What do you think? Please leave me a comment if you have an opinion about Department Store Santa versus Dogman.
We hope you liked that all-new story read by PQ River, our original reader on this channel. And we hope you're all having a good holiday season. This episode is brought to all of us by the donations of CS, who is one of the kindest people on the planet. We couldn't do it without her. And I know she loves Christmas, so we're dedicating our Christmas and holiday special to her. If you'd like to become as cool as CS, then hang on a second to listen to our international TV spokesmongrel, Henry Lee Dogman. And in either case, Happy Christmas, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, Festivus, or whatever else. And we'll see you again, most likely tomorrow or the day after, since we Bigfoot don't celebrate human holidays anyway. So happy holidays, and take it away, Hank. Thanks, Biggie, and thanks to all of you for watching this far. If you liked it, please click like. If you'd like to see more of our work, please subscribe. And also click that bell icon if you'd like to be notified when we put out a new episode. To become an executive producer, you can donate to us through the thanks button under each of our videos, or through our paypal.me/PeterBernard209 page. To receive cool perks like secret uncensored Dogman episodes far too wild to ever run on this channel, you can become a YouTube channel member by clicking the join button, or join our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com. Joining either at the $3 a month level or above gets you access to our over 25 hours of secret uncensored Dogman stories available nowhere else. Do you have a scary story about Dogman or some other kind of high strangeness that happened to you? Let us know by emailing us at scarystoriesnyc@gmail.com or by leaving us a voicemail message at 804-LA-SCARY. You may need to call back on that one. It cuts off after, I think, 3 minutes. And if you don't want to do any of that stuff, thank you for simply watching to the end. Good night, and have a scary tomorrow.
Come back for more scary stories.